how it all went south.
On New Year's Day in 1981, Fred Roehler, his wife Verna, and 8-year-old stepson Douglas, along with their little puppy named Lady, set sail on their yacht Perseverance, just as they had done many times before. They charted a course through the Channel Islands, located halfway between Malibu and Santa Barbara, California. For the family who were experienced sailors, this was just another day of fun on the water. But this trip would be different. This time, only one would come back alive, Fred Roehler. Theories and accusations would come quick, some blaming Fred Roehler for what happened on the water that day, others defending the man who was described as a, quote, model neighbor and family man. Was it an accident or was it murder? When one man and his wife set out to prove their friend Roehler's innocence, they instead found themselves entangled in a mystery that caused them to question everything they thought they knew. And this story makes me question, how well do we really know those people we call our friends? You know, everyone's got their backstory. Everyone's got their secrets and their skeletons in the closet.
I'm still suspicious of you, Sean.
I am not even remotely suspicious about you. I think your past involves textbooks.
There was a scandal with a trapper keeper one time.
I would believe that. I'm Sean Kipe, here with Jason Hoke. This is How It All Went South. And let's get started. Have you ever, in all honesty, have you ever wondered how well you truly know the people in your life? And I don't mean necessarily, your spouse or, your kids, but people that you associate with, people that, maybe you've known for a couple of years, but, how do you know everything about a person or their past before you came into their life? You ever wonder that?
Yes.
Not including me.
Well, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But I would say yes. And a lot of times, if you've got that instinct of like something just ain't right or something's not going right, and then 3 years later, a couple gets divorced, and you're like, I knew it. I knew there was something wrong there. We all have that instinct or that radar that we shoot up. We're like, I just don't know what they did during the day. Were they an FBI agent or did they actually go to work somewhere else?
Yeah.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah, and I think unless you have known someone for their entire life or the majority of it, when you meet someone and build a friendship or a relationship, you're sort of taking what they tell you, their history at face value. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But statistically, the average person will unknowingly encounter 39 people who have committed murder in their lifetime.
Sean?
Have not committed murder.
Okay.
I promise.
Just an accomplice, right? Accomplice.
An accomplished non-murderer.
Yeah.
Additionally, per data released by the FBI in 2017, the percentage of murders cleared by arrest or other means was 61.6%. In other words, in America, you have a 40% chance of getting away with murder.
So you're saying there's a chance.
You're telling me there's a chance. The lesser the crime, aggravated assault, rape, robbery, etc., that percentage actually goes up. Isn't that wild?
It's wild.
That's from the FBI. That's from the FBI.
Yeah, congrats for putting that out there for everyone. Right?
Murder's bad, y'all. No, I just thought it was interesting. There's always that. We work in true crime, man, and there's always that. Have you ever had that thought of I wonder in my life, have I encountered unknowingly a murderer?
I've never thought
or a serial, have I ever passed by a serial killer in my life and, without knowing? I mean, it's just kind of one of those
Nope, never had. I thought more. It's more of like
You will now.
Is that person? No, for me, it's like, is that person committing a financial crime?
Even
Like-
your nightmares are boring.
Yeah.
I was sorry, honey, to wake you up. I was getting chased by this giant calculator. Like my kid had a nightmare the other night. He woke up. He told me he was being. I said, "What? You have a bad dream?" Yeah. I said, "What was it?" He said, "Helicopter chasing me." That's Jason's giant calculator.
Hold on.
I'm gonna mess up your taxes intentionally.
Hold on here a second. Let me back up and say, when you look at someone and you're like, there's no way they can afford that house or that car. They got to be doing something wrong. There's got to be a cash business on the side. They got to be running drugs, or they got to be doing something with someone else's books. That's what I mean. So don't call me boring.
I didn't call you boring. I just throw a little pizzazz into your like daily life of like, look around when you drive home today for the rest of the day. I want you just to look at people and go, I wonder if that guy's a murderer. Try it.
I'm not going to do that.
Well, you will now, and you won't. Anyway, what if you found out that someone close to you, someone you considered a friend, a neighbor, might be a murderer? Well, that's what happened to Santa Barbara County residents Ivor and Sally Davis back in 1981. It all began when Ivor picked up the morning paper and saw his friend and neighbor, Fred Roehler's picture on the front page. In the picture, Roehler was on a stretcher being unloaded from a Coast Guard helicopter on his way to the hospital. His wife, Verna, and 8-year-old stepson, Douglas, had allegedly drowned at sea after their small dinghy, which was used to explore closer to the Channel Islands there, had capsized. Roehler said that the puppy named Lady went overboard while chasing seabirds. Douglas Is that not believable? He said that the dog jumped overboard, and a dinghy, it's small, right? Little small boat.
As is the puppy.
Well, yeah, it's a puppy. I had a puppy named Lady when I was a kid. She ended up on a farm.
John, if you need a moment to cry, go ahead.
If I was going to cry on the show, it would probably be about the loss of Lady. She was a sweet dog. Roehler said that their puppy Lady went overboard while chasing seabirds. Douglas tried to grab the dog, and Fred grabbed at Douglas to prevent him from falling in the cold water. In that commotion, the small dinghy overturned, and they all went overboard. This is his story. Roehler then said that he became entangled in his camera strap underneath the capsized boat, and by the time he was able to free himself, he was, I should mention, kind of a photography for fun kind of guy, just, as a hobby. So they would go out to these little islands, and he would, had a nice camera. Yeah. So he's saying he gets entangled in that underneath of the overturned boat. By the time he gets out and comes to the surface, what he saw can only be described as a nightmare. Verna was in bad shape, her arms slung over the small boat, and Douglas was floating face down in his life jacket. An incredibly strong swimmer, Roehler grabbed one family member under each arm and the small dog on his head, which I can assume means like on the back of his, like put the dog on his kind of back here. I don't think the dog was sitting on his head, but it's a confusing. And he headed to the nearest landmass called Bird Rock, just 150 yards away. For 45 minutes, Roehler held on to his family, but managed to get the dog up onto the land. And Bird Rock, we have some pictures of it. You can see there's, it's just a little landmass island that juts out. It's got fairly steep cliffs. They're not crazy tall, but it's kind of steep, And the water off Santa Barbara and that area in the Channel Islands is pretty choppy and rough. So hard to even stay afloat, for very long. He screamed at the first passing boat he saw, but no one heard him. Finally, they were spotted by a yacht, which pulled the three aboard, rescuing them. Sadly, Verna and Douglas were too far gone to be saved by the time they were pulled onto the boat. Days after the drownings, concerned friends and neighbors of Fred Roehler's, like Ivor and Sally Davis, rallied around him, offering condolences and support for what was surely the most trying and traumatic experience in his life. It would be for most people. Ivor and Sally thought Fred was a great man, a great husband and a father, and an adventurer. He even volunteered to coach the youth soccer league along with Ivor. But while half of the town of Malibu, where they lived, was busy supporting Fred Roehler, the other half was busy questioning him. Then, police began getting calls from neighbors that concerned them. One in particular posing an ominous question. This guy got away with killing his first wife. Are you going to let him get away with this one too?
Ooh, didn't see that coming.
There's a twist.
Wow.
Yeah, so the police got that call. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll find out just who Fred Roehler really is. All right, so we're back, and we've just heard this story. Fred Roehler goes out with his family for a day on the water. He comes back. He's the only one alive, and oddly enough, the dog was the only one on land. So maybe the dog is still alive.
I was just going to ask you, whatever happened to Lady?
Dog did not get rescued.
Hold your tears.
Yeah, dog didn't get rescued. But so now people in Malibu, and Malibu, I can tell you right now, everybody knows Malibu. It's ritzy. It's right on the beach. It's beautiful. Just caught on fire a couple weeks ago. It's a small community. It's a beach town. Even though
it's not what you imagine if you go there the first time, you're like, there's not even there's barely stoplights.
Yeah,
there's no like the restaurants are like the little, the little convenience store. I mean, there's restaurants, but you know what I'm saying? And by the way, everything's brown.
Yeah. It's a very very close knit community then and now.
Yeah.
It really is. You don't necessarily think of L.A. as not
right
thought of as a community place by some people, but anyway, so half of them think something's weird about this. And so the community is split. One of the main issues Malibu residents took with Fred Roehler after his family drowned was that Verna was not his first wife. That was a woman named Jean. Jean Roehler also drowned, but it was in the family's swimming pool several years earlier. Some thought Fred Roehler had a stroke of extremely bad luck, but others thought it was just too much of a coincidence to look past. The look on your face says you agree with that.
Yeah, red flag all over the place.
Sure. Yeah, red flag doesn't mean it's not possible, but man, what are the chances?
Well, and I don't know the whole story yet, but he's gonna have to come if how does he explain this when he comes back, knowing maybe
the dog was chasing seabirds?
Right. Obvious, right?
The story regarding Jean's death, according to Fred, was that the two had been in the hot tub when Jean asked Fred to get her another glass of wine. This is his first wife. When he got up to do that, he heard their baby crying, so he went to change its diaper. When he returned, she was face down in the pool, and though she had a faint pulse when paramedics arrived, she passed away shortly after. The story Fred Roehler told was that she had an aneurysm and drowned as a result. So anyone who knew him in the Malibu area, in his kind of current life, if they knew anything about his first wife dying, that's what he told him. She had an aneurysm.
But it was known. It was known that they had been married, and it was known that she had drowned because of this aneurysm.
Right. And I don't think it was something, I didn't get the impression that it was something everyone knew, but those close to him knew about it. So something like this happens, of course, it travels very quickly. Yeah. So now everyone knows, his first wife drowned too.
Right.
And that you can't blame him. Within weeks, police were skeptical of Roehler's story as well, and he was on the defensive now. He had a couple good points when maintaining his innocence. One, why would I kill two wives by drowning when I am an excellent swimmer? So, good point there, and he was, I think, a competitive swimmer. He swam in the ocean out there in those choppy waters, a very strong swimmer, and people knew that, what I mean? So, to his credit there, am I an idiot? Right. You know what I mean? That just doesn't make sense to anybody.
It's so obvious.
So obvious. How could I expect to not be a suspect? Also, the Roehler family was preparing to leave for a long vacation to sail around Mexico just 1 month from the time of the accident. Why would Roehler choose to kill his family on a busy holiday weekend in a well-traveled area when he could have waited 1 month and done it in a remote area of the ocean without any possible witnesses? Again, that's a really good point. If in 1 month we're going to be out in the water where there is no one around, I could make up anything and there's no one there to refute that. Why wouldn't you do that if you were planning to kill your wife? By this time, autopsies had been done on Verna and young Douglas, but after accusations about Roehler were coming into the sheriff's department, the two were re-autopsied just hours before their scheduled cremations. I mean, literally...
That's it. Once they're cremated, there's nothing else.
That's it. Yeah. And so literally within a couple hours, they're both going to be cremated, and the police went, wait, hold up. Let's do this again because something's not right here.
Actually brings up, if I can,
it
brings up a point about like, how do you know someone is or isn't a murderer? I wonder how many people that have committed heinous crimes, knowing that they could discover something on a person's body, had that person cremated as a result to hide evidence.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure.
You know what I mean?
You know, look, I'm not going to make any accusations here, but I was looking into the case in South Carolina, Micah Miller, not long ago. I think I was telling you about that, but it was all over the news. And there are people who've suspected her then husband, who she had just filed for divorce like 2 days before, right, 24 hours before she was dead, and she was cremated like immediately.
Oh,
and it
wow.
was really, really sketchy. And so that to your point,
yeah.
Now what do you use? There's nothing. What do you get to test for? Maybe, but
because I mean, exhuming bodies years later can give you clues that a cremation couldn't do in an instant, right?
And even to say, yeah, we can test the ashes for something. I don't know. You just as a long shot, right? But you have someone cremated, you take the ashes, I spread them at sea.
Right.
Was their final wish. You know what I mean? Like then there's zero evidence.
Exactly.
Even if it were possible, in my point.
Yep.
So famed LA coroner Dr. Thomas Noguchi performed the autopsies. And I say famed because he had become known as the coroner to the stars, performing autopsies on notable figures such as John Belushi, Janis Joplin, Robert F. Kennedy, Natalie Wood, and Marilyn Monroe. So I guess you would be kind of the coroner to the stars. What a title to...
Right.
It's on his business card. Noguchi found a pattern of bruising on the top of Douglas's head. He remarked that the bruising was consistent with Douglas's head being deliberately brought down with a particular part of the rowboat's gunnel. And the gunnel, if you don't know, is just kind of like the front part rim of the bow there. And it's upside down. So what he's saying is it appeared as if Fred Roehler is kind of like holding him down with that.
Oh, wow.
The top of his head, holding him underwater. He's saying that's what it looks like. 3 months after the accident, Ivor Davis once again picked up the newspaper and saw that his friend Fred Roehler's picture again was on the front page. This time it was because Roehler had been arrested and charged with the murder of Verna and Douglas to collect on a $700,000 life insurance policy, which is about $2.5 million today.
Yep.
Roehler's neighbors, Ivor and Sally Davis, were both writers. Sally, a former journalist and magazine writer, and Ivor, a former foreign correspondent and author. Fun fact, Ivor Davis traveled around with the Beatles on tour in 1964 to document their lives, and then wrote a book called The Beatles and Me on Tour.
Really?
Yeah, check it out. It's one of those, like, off topic, but I mean, it's one of those like really awesome looks into the early days of the Beatles as they were breaking.
Incredible.
And he was there to just
Wow.
document. So this guy's got some chops. He's a smart dude. He's been very successful. He's a writer, and he's done a lot of cool things like this. Well, they begin to investigate the case and write a book with the intention of proving their friend's innocence. Something Roehler was initially not interested in when his trials began in 1982, in May of 1982, thinking he was going to beat the charges against him. So he was like, I don't need a book to... But when Roehler was found guilty of the murder of Verna Roehler and Douglas Johnson, it was his stepson, and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, his tune kind of changed. It's like, yeah, let's write that book and try to prove me innocent. Yeah. Go for it. As I mentioned previously, what Ivor and Sally Davis found in the investigation that followed changed the way they, and maybe you and I, and you, should look at our friends. Mm-hmm. When we come back, we'll find out what they learned from digging deep into Fred Roehler's past. So Fred Roehler has now been arrested, charged, stood trial, and charged with murder, the murder of his wife, second wife, who's died of drowning, and his stepson. And he's been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His friends, Ivor and Sally Davis, say, we want to help you. We want to prove, because we know you're innocent. We know you, man. You're a good dude. You coach soccer. You coach youth soccer. There's no way. Ivor and Sally Davis begin researching and investigating for their book with Fred Roehler's cooperation, interviewing him numerous times at San Quentin, where he was serving his sentence. They also began asking questions to those in and around Malibu who also knew Fred Roehler and his family and were either suspicious of him or outright accused him of murder from the start, because there were those people. They'd been present at the trial and heard all of the details on how Roehler had recently taken out several large insurance policies, one on Verna and one on each of their children. They had a kid together, and then Douglas was the stepson. The policy on each child was for $60,000, which most found odd. $60,000 policy on a young child in the early 80s. I mean, it's,
we've talked about
$100,000.
We've talked about this before. Like, having a life insurance policy on a child to begin with can be problematic.
Yeah, I mean, some kind of life insurance maybe I can see, but in an excessive amount, that's odd. And one on each of your children and your wife, and why does a child need this crazy life insurance policy? When asked about this, Roehler claimed his family attorney had recommended this to him. He also said that the beneficiary of all the policies was his family trust, not him. But Ivor and Sally uncovered handwritten notes in Fred's handwriting stating that he and Verna were the beneficiaries for each other's policies. Then, the Davises learned that when Roehler's first wife, Jean, had drowned in the pool, Fred told people it was the result of an aneurysm, and she, saying that was the official cause. They looked through coroner's reports and medical records and found that wasn't true at all. Dun, dun, dun.
Wow. Put a narrative out there that isn't even true, thinking that no one would ever think to check.
Yeah, right. Yeah. How are these people even going to know? Where to look, you know what I mean? Like, why would they even look into that?
Like, who has time to go down to the coroner's office and look up a fact like this if it's delivered so confidently by the person who says this is what happened?
Well, that in 1982, you weren't just going online to the coroner's office, and
that's what I mean.
You know what I mean?
You've got to actually get in your car and go down to this. Yeah.
Yeah. When they confronted Roehler about this, he said that the medical experts weren't sure why she drowned, and that an aneurysm just sounded like a reason most people would understand. And you got to think they're sitting in prison with him going, we believe you. We want to prove your innocence. And now they're finding out these discrepancies and you have these insurance policies on the kids and the wife that just were taken out recently. That looks weird to anybody. So they're kind of trying to look past all this, and give him the benefit of the doubt. But you start finding all these other things, and then his explanations are, oh, well, the doctors never actually really figured out why she drowned, but that just sounded like something,
And like a life insurance policy of a significant amount, it's just like, wow, that would change my mind in a minute.
Yeah, and if your lawyer was advising you to do some weird shit like that, wouldn't you be like, why? The Davises also learned that Jean had been having an affair and that she had told her therapist that she was ready to divorce Roehler and that Roehler collected on a large insurance policy after her death on October 15th, 1976. Now they're seeing a pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or beginning to, I should say. Then they went to his hometown in Indiana. There, it was hard to find anyone with a good word to say about Fred Roehler. Through interviewing dozens of people, they learned that his father had collected on numerous insurance policies over the years, such as when one of his boats mysteriously exploded, then another of his boats burned, and an old barn in their backyard burned, all providing hefty insurance payouts. And the barn that burned in his father's backyard was so that one of their other children, I don't think it was Fred Roehler, but it was, his brother, had just gotten married, and I think his wife was pregnant, and they were struggling a bit financially maybe, and so this barn burns. They get this insurance policy. They build a new barn with basically an apartment in the loft. It was like just conveniently worked out. And so, but the people, there were people in town even going like,
I learned everything from my father.
Kind of seeming that way.
Including insurance fraud.
Looking further still into Fred Roehler's financial background, they found he as well had collected on numerous insurance policies, such as a car that had burned, a houseboat that had burned, and even the mysterious burning of one of his neighbor's homes in Malibu, who had been interfering with his construction plans for his own beach house. That instance was followed by a ridiculously low offer by Fred to buy the man's burned house and land.
Sure.
God, what parallels are to what's going on in the world right now? We hear about this stuff, whether it's true or not, but this stuff in like Hawaii and of course in California, where it's like, oh, your house burned? I wanted that land, and now and again, whether there's truth to that or it's conspiracy, who knows, but it's being talked about, right? You come in with this really ridiculously low offer. Hey, you're going to start over. Why not, make a little coin on the land? I'll take it off your hands for you.
Well, not even that. You make a claim on your insurance and maybe you collect, right? Today, there's a high degree of probability that you're canceled.
Yeah, you won't collect.
Like, you're not going to be able to do this over and over again, or even have a policy in general, right? Like it's just
you've collected 3 times. We're not going to insure you.
Yeah, they'll only do it once,
which is probably why that part of the reason why that is, right? Is
right.
To prevent stuff like this.
Right.
But
secret formula. Yep.
Yeah. By now, of course, Ivor and Sally Davis had become uncomfortable even interviewing Roehler. They'd caught him in numerous lies that he would try to explain away one way or another, and he hadn't asked one time how his other children were faring with losing Verna and Douglas to the sea and him to prison. So, he had obviously his other child from his first marriage, but I mean, you've got your other kids. You're not one time asked, hey, how are they? These are good friends of yours.
Yeah.
You coach, Little League soccer, whatever, youth soccer with it. It's like, this is your community, and you haven't even asked, hey, how are my kids doing? Their mom just died, their stepbrother or brother just died, and now their dad's in prison for life.
It's almost like a bigger red flag than the insurance policy being taken out of. Like, what's your emotional state?
Right. They also received an audio recording of the Roehler family on a separate boating excursion in which they could hear Fred Roehler. So someone, they were out on the boat at another point with friends. Someone had, an audio recording that now, as they're looking into this and all this stuff's happening, there's of course things in the paper about it. Wow. Someone sent this to them when they found out that they were writing a book.
How rare is that?
Very rare. But, you've also got a small yacht. You know what I mean? Like, these people.
True.
That equipment wasn't cheap in 1982, but you're living in Malibu.
It has like these little panels with the dials.
Oh yeah, it was probably a big old contraption.
Yeah.
But they received an audio recording of the Roehler family on a separate boating excursion in which they could hear Fred Roehler speaking in a very nasty way to his young stepson Douglas. Fred had said at the trial he loved Douglas and that there was no ill will toward him. But close family and friends painted a different picture, saying the two clashed frequently. The last thing Ivor and Sally Davis did was to visit the area where Fred allegedly clung to Bird Rock trying to save the lives of Verna and Douglas. What they discovered was once the dinghy overturned, Roehler chose instead to swim away from his boat, the Perseverance, toward the 25-foot sheer cliff face of Bird Rock. An illogical choice given the distance to the safety of the boat nearby, right? The specific area he chose to, quote unquote, await rescue was in a cove, hidden on 3 sides. There was a blowhole nearby that was very loud, and as the water rushed in and out, and easily disguised any kind of screaming or yelling that might have been heard otherwise, even if Verna and Douglas had been conscious by this point. So, they're just in this little cove where the only view of them is out to the open ocean. And the only thing out there really at that point was his boat.
Which solves the mystery of why do it during a busy, a busy time with more people looking at you versus, Mexico later on, right?
Yeah, but you're still taking the chance, right, of somebody coming by. I mean, there were 2 boats, while allegedly there was a boat.
But if he's experienced enough, he would know where that place is and know what the traffic is, probably.
And they knew the area very well.
Yeah.
They were able to piece together that Roehler likely rowed the dinghy to Bird Rock, where he allowed one of the victims and the dog, which was rescued the next day by a friend, by the way. I knew that was coming back. Somebody did, well, hey, man, little puppy sitting out there to starve or drown, So one of their friends got the dog. But he likely rowed the dinghy to Bird Rock, where he allowed one of the victims and the dog to exit the boat, thereby separating them. So whether it was Douglas or Verna that was on the rock, now they're separated. And when you're on that rock, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You're trying to hold on. Then rowed away from the rocks where he drowned one of them, returning for the other afterwards and pulling them off the rock.
While the person whoever it is on the rock is watching this.
Is watching. Yeah. And then once, and you almost want to think, and I hate even thinking this way, but I don't want to say if it was me, if I was doing it, but you would almost think it was the mother first because she's going to be stronger, most likely than a teenage kid.
I was going to go the opposite.
Maybe, but we don't know. But I mean, in just that thought of like a young kid being stranded on this rock and what is already a terrifying experience,
right?
You know what I mean? It just has to be. And watching your mother get drowned by your stepfather, and then coming for you, I just like that's fucking terrible, man.
Terrible.
It's a terrible thought. When Fred Roehler wanted to read the manuscript for the book before being released, after they had finished, the Davises refused, causing Roehler to threaten a lawsuit if they continued with its release. That scared their publisher enough to drop the book, and it was shelved until earlier this year, in 2024.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, that's I had heard about this story, but that is actually what brought it back to my attention, was like they just released the book last year. And so it's called The Devil and My Friend. Roehler is in his 80s now and still in prison as of the time of this episode, having multiple requests for parole denied. I want to say Ivor's wife passed away a few years back, but he is still alive, the author of the book, and he was actually out doing like a press tour of it and in local Santa Barbara stuff, you know what I mean, and doing. I watched some videos of him just kind of talking about knowing Fred Roehler and what it was like for him to and his wife to truly be convinced that my friend is innocent and I know him. His family, he's a good man. And to find all this stuff out organically on your own, little by like piece by piece, and to gradually have your image of someone change.
So he changed his mind.
100%.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I think it's accepted, but certainly that was the author's consensus was
And what
that
year did this
likely
originally happen?
81.
So it took,
Basically New Year's Eve, New Year's Day of.
so you're talking like 42, 43 years to get the book published about what, kind of, and probably written in a tone from some of that back then too, as it was being, that's,
Sure.
wow.
Yeah, and I don't know if he went back and edited or whatever, but the book was released, and I think, I thought it was so cool that story is out there, because it's a really, especially 40 years later, it's a really intimate inside look at that person, not just what you read in the papers of like, this is a guy who knew him well.
I think that could be a good movie.
I'm sure it probably will be.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Malibu, and
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's what I was, as you were telling the story, I was
Yeah.
like, that's a great movie, actually.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would watch it. I think it's got a little bit of everything. We always go on. I always go on about this. Just things where kids end up victims.
Yep.
There's just a special place in hell for people who are guilty of that. But to think about drowning a kid, for a couple $100,000, I mean, there's no amount of money, but just that money would have been spent, whatever, a couple years at most, and then like, what do you do? Marry some, go kill another wife, I mean, it's just,
yeah. And there's something about the upper crust lifestyle habits of the rich and famous, being on a yacht, that also just plays into our fascination with people that we don't know anything about or we can't relate to, as just everyday people.
Yeah.
And the lives they live, how Malibu is different, like you talked about, the yachts, like, I'll never be on that yacht and be able to go to Bird Island or anything. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it just, or Bird Rock, it's foreign to me.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more fascinating and makes you want to find out more about that story.
Yeah, because you got to think, they were obviously doing well enough to be living in that area.
Right.
So, and I know he got a big chunk of money from his first wife's death, but I mean, and other, sounds like everything was paid for by insurance fraud. And I think I did read, don't quote me on this, but I think I read somewhere that his salary, granted this is 1981, but it was only like maybe $50,000 a year, which is good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, so, and I say only, but for 1981, that's not bad. But even still, Malibu's expensive, man.
Yeah.
But
maybe he hit it like early part of the 80s before it turns into
there was a
Malibu.
Yeah, there was a point where it was just a beach community where it was like,
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but I mean, the 70s, it was just like trailers and shacks and just,
Be really interested to see how that community rebuilds. And, it's not only just the fires and the loss of the houses, but, they get mudslides. There's earthquakes from time to time. Like, it's, how do you rebuild an area that is so not traditional? It'll be really interesting to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the story of Fred Roehler, and I hope you enjoyed it. It was
very good.
I say enjoyed it, but found it interesting.
Yeah, fascinating.
Anyway, it is a fascinating story, and I'm sure there'll be a movie at some point. I'm Sean Kipe. That's Jason Hoke. Make sure to check us out on all the social media sites at How It All Went South. And if you haven't watched the YouTube, check it out. We'll see you soon. Thanks.